Hey YouTubers, Nicholas Medovich with Strasbourg 1991 Productions, and again, here is part 2 of my book haul that I would love to share to literary gladiators. To Ali Fakrazada, Josh Caparelli, Zach Laws, you've been like brothers of mine. Thank you so much for your commitment to courage and compassion. One of the books I've actually decided to find out, I've actually had this book in like 25 plus years. This is actually something called Norfolk and Western, the last 25 years, and it's basically the history of the Norfolk and Western Railroad. You can see in this 1987 NRHS Annual Convention of Class A number 1218 and 484J Class 611 in Roanoke, where I'm from. And this takes about Winston Link's locomotives collection. And on the back here, you could actually see the main line of where the coal hauling railroads and passenger service actually ran up to today, when it merged in 1982 with the Southern Railroad, became Norfolk Southern ever since. Since 40 years is actually approaching very quickly, I thought it'd be interesting to share some of the locomotives in this book. All collections, all models, from Class Y5s and Y6Bs on the N&W. These are two 882 Chesapeakes, the 2882 meaning the wheel arrangement, two pilot wheels, two pairs of 8 sets of driving wheels, and 2 trailing wheels under the cab, hence the wheel configuration and the white system. Most of these locomotives, all these locomotives were actually built for coal hauling railroads up in southeastern West Virginia, and they've actually been passing through parts like Crum, Gray Eagle, and Williamson before they actually took their shop service actually outside of Columbus, Ohio, on the Piedmont Division of the N&W. There are also some actual footages of the Class A2664 articulateds. You can see here, these are locomotives number 1222 and 1234. Both have been scrapped since 1957. And have actually, the only survivor of that classification is the 1218, which I showed you in a previous Silver Steam video, excursion trips out of Roanoke during the spring and summers of 1991. Actually, almost the day when I was born, when it was featured for the actual NRHS Annual Convention in Huntington, West Virginia, which is a totally different portion of the video. One of my factors actually is Winston Link's 1238. This is actually one of the other Class A locomotives, which actually, you can see here, this is actually one of the few coal hauling roads up into Crewe, Virginia, which is actually east of Lynchburg. And there are actually some audio clips of Winston Link, who's a famous railroad photographer. He's a railroad photographer of the Norfolk and Western and loved trains and used flash bulbs to stop the camera action and actually captured man and machine working together for the last time before it was dieselized. There are other footages of locomotives. You actually go through here. The Class J's the J1s were actually, the first batch from 600 to 605 were non-streamlined. And during World War II, they actually went for the streamlined design. This is actually the Class J1, these are the engines when they were not streamlined at the turn of the century. You could see on the bottom page the configuration, and you could take a look at the firebox design and the tons of coal and how many gallons of water the engine could carry in its tender, which is a wagon behind the steam locomotive. The only surviving Class J locomotive, of course, is the N&W 611. And the 613 was the last engine built for N&W at 1950-51 or so. I actually found some interesting footage about some unusual locomotives, including the M2 automatic switchers, you could operate them without any crew members. So it's a one-handed crew. You can leave them unattended for several hours. Two of them, the 1100 and the 1118, were two of those examples. They've been scrapped since 1954. But they actually had plans to make a third engine, 1151, but since they bought several 080 switchers from the Chesapeake and Ohio, that plan was scrapped. You could actually see 1100. The only thing I'm very surprised is the fleshed headlights flushed in with the smoke box door, the visage, which is the inner part of the smoke box door. And you also have like interesting factors of the boiler shroud design on these locomotives. And here's the sister 1118, which is the other class automated switcher. But one of the factors that one of the other locomotives I was very proud of, actually was more shocked with, were the Water Buffalo 482 K3 mountain type locomotives. Some of them actually went to the Denver and Rio Grande Western, and some of them went to the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad. They actually almost had the same actual, very similar Baker's designed valve gear for a 284. The only reason why they were not exactly successful is the running gear was actually cranked to the second pair of driving wheels actually cranked to the third pair of driving wheels rather than the second. And that performance did not make them as successful on the market. But as you could actually see, they were actually the only thing they were actually good for, heavy coal. And they actually were like turbo superheated steam locomotives, which actually meant the tube sheets had larger holes for the superheater tubes. And they were all of them were superheater tubes. And hence the firebox temperature actually went above 2,500 degrees. To the highest, actually, it was 2,550 was the max. 2,800 was actually the very highest, and the maximal temperature you could find in a smoke box, a firebox of that nature to maintain temperature. And they were also extremely sweaty as designed, like the slobber-faced engines on the Buffalo Creek and Gully were 280 consolidations. They were saturated steam engines because they recycled the steam once. Superheated locomotives mean that they actually recycled the water and the steam generator cycle twice. For turbo, they actually recycled it 3 times, but that was actually a form of superpower that wasn't actually invented until maybe the beginning of 1935 to 1937. But in this photo, you can actually take a look at the roster of the whole steam locomotives, and this is probably one of the most famous books I've actually haven't read in 25 years. When I lived in Jersey, it got one of the other cover backs. One of the original copies just fell apart and was thrown away. This is actually an eBay copy from, I think it was like 1995, beginning of 1996 or so, and this is in excellent condition. I do highly recommend, and this is actually one of my most favorite books to find ever since I grew up. One of my childhood books is this right here, and I've been very fortunate to actually have this over the last 25 years since the original cover back was thrown away. But if anybody goes out on the market, I highly recommend you find this book because it is extremely knowledgeable of every information you could find. Chapter, directly, indirectly, I recommend you find that book. It is a 10 out of 10 high balls. I recommend it. You can't get any better than footage in action than this. And actually, one of the photos, one of my colleagues is in the actual photograph of one of their 482 class K2A Mountains, which were streamlined locomotives. Last locomotive number being 137 was the actual last locomotive to actually run on that main line. And there were plans on making a Y7, but since dieselization took over, that plan was scrapped by the end of 59, beginning of 1960-61. But this is Nicholas Medovich. I'll see you on another adventure. So long.